Good evening, everybody. This is Brian Johnson. Just doing a sound check here before we begin. As I see a number of people joining in on the call, so we're going to give them a few minutes here just to join, and then we'll get started. I ask that when you do join in, also make sure that you can see the chat section on the right-hand side on YouTube, and to introduce yourself with your name and location. Thank you. Just to check from everybody else's standpoint, I'm getting a report of some echo or some bad audio. Can anybody else confirm that they're hearing echo from me, from my audio, or that it's distorted in any way? All right, I'm going to get started. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you joining us here. My name is Brian Johnson. I am the moderator for the Amazon PPC troubleshooting group on Facebook, as some of you may know. And I've had a chance to interact with a number of you here already, so welcome again. What we're going to be talking about tonight is interpreting Amazon's campaign reports, specifically focusing in on the first couple of reports that I find most important on a day-to-day basis for my consulting practice, as well as for the software development that we have. I am co-founder along with my brother Mark Johnson, who's also on the call, and we had actually developed, just full disclosure here, we had developed recently a product called PPC Scope, and that is slowly being released these days. The free version is currently available, but this is purely going to be an educational and question and answer session. This is not going to be a pitch for any kind of software. There is nothing to buy. So just enjoy the content. And the way that we're going to have the format here is to, I'm going to go ahead and go through my slides, just to kind of keep a structured pace. Otherwise, I'll get way off topic. And so what I'd like you to do is to hold off your questions, or actually, in fact, post your questions as they come up into the chat section on the YouTube, the Google Hangout YouTube broadcast. And then when I finish up with the slides, I'll come back and take a look at those and review the questions and give as many answers as I can. If we do have time, I may delve into some of the other advertising reports. There's about 8 of them. I'm going to cover 2 primary ones. That's going to be the search term report and the campaign performance report, because those are the ones that I find most actionable on a day-to-day basis. All right. As far as the basics, now this is assuming, of course, that each one of you have already set up your own Amazon sponsored ad campaigns, and that you've had a little bit of experience as far as seeing, some of the wins and the frustrations that can provide. Hopefully you're moving in a forward direction, and if not, hopefully what I provide today will give you a little bit of edge forward. But just going through some of the basics here, as far as the 2 reports that I'm going to cover on your Amazon Seller Central account, in the top navigation menu, there's a reports menu item, and then followed by advertising reports. And then within advertising reports, you can request the search term report, and you can also request the campaign performance report. Now, one of the things I would mention on that is go ahead and get in the habit. There's the ability to set up recurring reporting, or basically scheduled reporting, and I believe it's called scheduled reporting, that you can just edit and set it up so that each week it's automatically going to run, and that way Amazon is always producing these reports for you, and so that you don't have any gaps, and that'll be very handy in the future when you want to go back and backtrack and see some of the history. As far as some basic definitions here, there is some confusion that's been out there as far as the keywords versus the terms keywords versus search terms. According to Amazon, keywords are described as basically what we as Amazon sellers are bidding upon in our campaigns. These are the keywords that we're targeting in hopes that our ad will be shown to prospective buyers of our product listing. The search terms, or in the search term report, it's actually called customer search terms, but the search term is actually what the shoppers type into the search bar in Amazon when they are looking for the product. And so our goal is to do a few things. One is, first of all, we want to make sure that whatever the general audience is searching for, they ultimately find our ad and ultimately find our listing, so that ultimately they can purchase our product. And I'll go into a little bit more detail as far as the mechanics of that, and as far as a little bit of strategy on that. But if you look at it from a standpoint of Amazon's advertising platform, especially with the recent introduction, or I should say reintroduction, because they actually had this a couple years ago, they reintroduced the exact match and phrase match searches, but then they also added on a negative match, and I'll get into that. So in Amazon's eyes, the way that they're going to typically show the advertisements to shoppers who are conducting a search typically a keyword or a search term search, is they're going to focus in first of all on the exact matches, ones where in my example here on the screen, if you can see it, is if they're searching for tent stake and you happen to be bidding on the exact match term tent stake, then you have a very high likelihood that your ad is going to be shown. Now obviously once that is established as far as the priority based on the exact match, then you can then Amazon's going to look at things as far as like how relevant is the search term to your particular product. Just because you're bidding on it doesn't mean that Amazon's going to serve your advertisement if it doesn't think that your product is relevant to what the shopper is actually searching for. Additionally, as far as what the conversion rate is, as far as the conversion rate of your particular product, Amazon's in the e-commerce business. They want to show the advertisements and to promote product listings that are more likely to convert into sales because it means more money to them. Happier customers. Customer experience is going to be there first and foremost. And then following that, it's going to be how much you bid, how much, what the competition is, how much you're bidding against other sellers for the same position. You've probably seen quite a bit of juggling around that Amazon is doing as far as they're doing a lot of multivariate testing when it comes to their ad placement. And so you'll see that the sponsored ads are moving around depending on which category you're in, depending on which search or which page you're on. You'll see that the advertisements will show. Typically, they're going to be fairly consistent as far as showing on the right sidebar. On the right hand, you'll see a vertical column of, I believe it's 4 advertisements. But they've been playing around quite a bit with the horizontal placement as far as whether or not they're putting 1, 2, 3 sponsored ads at the very top, which is that prime real estate, whether they're putting it down in the middle, all the way down at the bottom. And so they're experimenting with that to see what is going to have the best traction. As other platforms such as Google AdWords and some of these other major platforms has found, is that that's going to change over time, what they call banner blindness, in which buyers stop seeing the ads in the place that they're normally shown, so they have to move them around periodically in order to keep mixing it up, in order to keep getting the shopper eyeballs on the advertisement. So in some cases, it's going to seem like, especially if we're organically ranked well, it's that those advertisements are going to push our organic ranking down, and that can be frustrating. But at the same time, it's also Amazon's goal to try to get a conversion out of the whole transaction they have with the customer. What I would typically recommend on that is that even if you are ranking well, even if you're in the top of the fold, top 5, for instance, of the organic search ranking with your product listing, continue to advertise. And in what I personally do is I continue to advertise aggressively. The way I look at it is the more real estate that I own in the visible space on a search result for my target audience, the better chance that I have of that customer buying my product. I'm not looking. My first priority is not to save money by not spending on advertising. My first priority is to get a shopper to look at my listing, and from there, it's up to me, obviously, to make sure I have a listing and a product and pricing and everything in order to convert well. So back to as far as ad placement, is that it's going to start out with that exact match. It's going to tier down so that following exact match, it's going to be phrase match. That can be typically where you've got a couple of words that are connected together, they're in order, and maybe there's some other additional words that are connected to the left or the right, and in some cases, if they are non-descriptive or non-product related, keywords in the middle. Say, for instance, if you have, if you're bidding on, in the phrase match one, we've got tent stake is what we're bidding on, and the customer is searching for steel tent stake, we have a high likelihood of our ad being shown because we're bidding on tent stake. Even if the customer is searching for something like steel steak with tint. There are in Amazon's algorithm, they will discount things like, they'll basically ignore things like with or of or for, some of those connector words, and they'll still consider it a phrase, even though it seems like it seems like it's, you know, broken up. It's not quite the same. But and then broad is what we're typically used to, where any order, any connecting, singular, plural, doesn't matter. It's gonna come up. Broad is typically going to be the cheapest cost per click. Phrase is going to be more expensive, and from what we've been testing over the past few weeks, is exact is going to be the most expensive. You're going to get more, or you get, sorry, it's going to be more expensive cost per click. It's going to have lower impressions. However, it is typically going to have a higher conversion rate. So and the psychology behind that, of course, is that you are directly advertising for the exact term that a customer is looking for, and as long as that exact term that you're advertising an exact match for is directly relevant to with your product, then you have a much higher likelihood of conversion. Okay. So then with the search term report, this used to be called the automatic targeting report. It used to have a higher focus on the automatic campaigns versus the campaign performance report, which was a little bit more broad, but it was still considered focused on the manual. Recently, with Amazon's recent change, adding in the phrase exact and negative matches, they also updated the search term report. They added a couple of things in there that were helpful, and they took away something that was helpful. So it was kind of a win-win loss. So I'll go into a little more detail on that. But primarily, the search term report is what I use the most. It's the first report that I look at anytime that I'm working with a client, anytime that I'm analyzing as far as whether or not, if there's any problems with an advertising campaign that I'm working with, or if I'm looking for an opportunity to expand the traffic or to, you know, just optimize my campaigns better. And so it is a 60-day window, so that's another reason why you want to keep the automatic scheduled reports running on Amazon, so that you'll always have that history there, so you can go back on it later on if you want to, especially with tools like, you know, I'm going to, you know, plug it here now and then, but with tools like PPC Scope, which are going to chain these reports together and be able to give you a more longer term history, so that you can see longer trends and patterns, seasonal patterns, for instance. Over time, you'll be able to build upon this, and so start now. Go ahead and have those reports scheduled for both search term report and campaign performance report. And also, you can also do, like, say, the estimated page one bid report as well. So the primary advantage of the search term report is going to be the new, well, actually they split it up. So it's basically two fields now. You've got this customer search terms field, which actually shows you what customers were actually searching for, and then it has the keywords that that search term was matched up to. Most people have recognized, you know, they've gone in there and they say, well, how come there's an asterisk in place of the keyword? That's simply Amazon protecting their proprietary system of delivering, of matching up customer search terms with your with the keywords that you're bidding on. So they're intentionally hiding that for automatic campaigns, because they're trying to protect that for whatever reason. It's usually pretty easy to figure out which of your search terms were used, unless you've got, you know, tens of thousands of search terms that, you know, are keywords that you're bidding on. It's usually pretty easy to figure it out by looking at the search term that the customer put in and say, you know what, it's a pretty good chance it's one of these 3 or 4. And you start seeing a pattern the more you look down at other transactions. So it's not that big of a loss. You can figure that out. And actually, one of the things that we're going to be building into PPC Scope, and I'll just one last mention on this here, but has to do with keyword phrase matching too. So that'll be coming down the pike here later on this year, and that's designed to find some of these phrases and some of these phrase match and exact match terms that you can use for your benefit or to avoid unnecessary costs. So with the search term report, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a spreadsheet just to kind of give you a walkthrough as far as what I typically do when I'm setting up a search term report in order to look for the data that is important. And so typically what I'm going to do is I'm going to, after I've downloaded the report, it's going to come in a .txt file format. If you're on a Mac, then it's going to automatically be a .txt.tsv file extension. It's not really that important, but there's some other considerations as far as how you use that report later on. But for this example, it's the same report. The report seems to be fairly consistent across different regions as far as whether that's Amazon, .com, .co.uk, across the different Amazon selling regions. The difference primarily is the currency typically is going to switch around, but otherwise mostly it's going to be the same report. So let me just jump into an actual one. So what I simply did is I just jumped in. So for instance, if I have downloaded the search term report, which is still titled on the file, it's still titled as the auto keyword report. The auto keyword report I downloaded, typically if I'm in a Windows environment and I've got Microsoft Office and Excel, I can simply just right click on this on the file and I can use open with Excel. And in most cases, it's going to just open right up in Excel in a formatted, because it is a tab delimited format. There is another way of doing that if you're struggling with that, or if you're on a Mac. You might also try something like Google Sheets. It's a little bit more restrictive in some formatting, but it still should work just fine. So when I'm setting up, when I'm in an Excel environment, and I happen to be using Excel 2013 on a Windows 8.1 system, and so that's my environment. Hopefully, if that matches up with yours, great. I have actually created a macro that does most of this setup pretty quickly in Excel, but I'll kind of give you a basics as far as what I typically do. So initially, I'll just start out and I'll format it so that I can see all the columns, and maybe I'll shrink down some of the some of the ones that I don't care about as much. The big ones that I'm concerned about, actually, before I do that, let me I'm going to select all of these and just kind of do some basic formatting. And I'm going to try to limit what I'm doing here just so that we don't take up too much time. But I'm going to right click on the top row and I'm going to do some formatting. And a couple things I'm going to do on this is for alignment, I'm just going to wrap the text. I'm going to set it to a bold text, for instance. That's enough. That should be fine. And then and then I'll shrink down some of the columns so that they wrap and so that I can see more of them a little bit easier. And then also what I'll typically do is I will make it so that I'll select the view, freeze panes option, and I'll freeze the top row just so that when I scroll down, I can always see the headers. So now that I've centered some content, and I'll tell you as far as what my top, I'll actually just run through this really quick here. The campaign name is typically going to be the high level. So when you set up your advertising account in sponsored ads, you have your account, which is basically your umbrella for all of your campaigns. You can set up your campaigns, and I typically set up campaigns so that I either split them up by either automatic or manual campaigns. And then in the ad groups within each one, I'll typically actually break it down so that it has individual products. When I first started out, I just used an ad group of 99 as a title. Not very creative. Didn't help me later on. Since then, I've been a lot more focused in as far as saying, okay, here is, I'm going after vitamin X or something like that, or maybe I'll put in my ASIN number or my SKU, however I want to do it, so that I can come back and I can quickly see how a specific ad group is going after, is focused on a product. Now, that being said, I've also set up campaigns and ad groups that specifically focus in on a type of test that I'm running. I do a lot of testing. And so a test might simply be as far as whether I'm testing exact match, phrase match, whether I'm going after competitors, whether I am testing going against targeting specific ASIN numbers as their search. And so there's a lot of different, or maybe, for instance, I'm building a campaign that I'm pulling in keywords that I've researched from the various platforms, including whether I pulled it in from Google AdWords, whether I pulled it in from Merchant Words, the reverse ASIN lookup, for instance, for Keyword Inspector. I'm sure there's a lot of different tools out there that are available that people use, but I think those are some of the big ones, as well as Google Trends I also look at. Anyway, kind of a side note there. So customer search term, that is one of my primary ones, and so I'm just going to go ahead and highlight that one here so that you know which ones I'm looking at. The match type, that's going to become more relevant the more we get experience, the more testing that we do with the broad phrase and match, exact match. Last day of impressions, I guess one other thing I can do on this top header is I can highlight it and I can do a filter, which is simply just, I guess it's Control-Shift-L in Excel, but that allows me to sort and to filter out these spreadsheets. What I typically do as far as the impression range in the search term report, it actually shows a range. The campaign performance report, that actually has it on a day-to-day basis. You can actually see the impressions and the click-throughs and the sales on a day-to-day basis. Now, as everybody knows, it doesn't update for a few days as far as the reporting goes. However, if you're looking like, say, a month later, you can look back and you can see a day-to-day format. And that'll be all graphically laid out and everything on a tool like PPC Scope, for instance. But for what I typically do is if I'm looking for just ones that are active, what I typically am going to do so that it doesn't throw off my numbers a whole lot, I will look at maybe the last, like say maybe I'm looking at the month of October, except if I just pulled this, typically I'm going to look at the last day that it's showing and I'm going to cut off the last 3 days. Simply because there's usually very thin sales data that's available in these reports because of the lag of when customers actually check out and pay for items, or the payment clears, I should say, and the sales data shows up. So if you don't cut off the last 3 days, then you're going to have a bunch of impressions, a bunch of clicks, and a bunch of ad spend, but you're not going to show any useful sales data. It can be misleading if you don't do that. So I'm just going to look for now. I'm going to look for campaigns that were still active, that I didn't pause, 3 months ago, that are still active as of this month, as an example, and whatever you choose you want to do. And I'm going to cut off the last 3 days. So then I've filtered that out a little bit. I'm also going to take a look at, let's see here, impressions, clicks. I want to know about those. Total spend, I'm going to make that one a red one, so that's alerted to it. I do look at the average cost per click. That's one of those things that you look at when you start getting into more detail. I do look at the ACOS. And then also, In the search term report, it's going to be a 1 week time span. So the 1 week time span is going to include, like I said, like it shows here, orders that are placed within 1 week of a click, or sales. It's also going to refer to whether or not they're the same product as far as the advertisement. If you have multiple products, you can have shoppers that click through on your ad and are looking to buy your product, but then they find one of your other products, maybe a different color, a variation as an example, and they might buy that one instead. That one's going to show up under your other SKU units ordered. That is not referring to competitors or anything. That's within your own product set. So I will typically look at orders placed and product sales. I do look at specifically at units ordered in a different setting, but for the sake of this analysis, I'm going to look at the orders specifically. So when I'm looking at this, let's see here. Okay, so that pretty much covers those. I'm going to do a couple of adjustments here, and hopefully I don't lose anybody who's not too technical on this, but I'll be glad to assist you after the call, on a future date, if you need further assistance on this. But so one of the things that I like to do that I find that is missing from the search term report, first of all, the search term report, they removed the actual product identifier, the SKU field, which is still in the campaign performance report, but it's no longer available in the search term report, which is unfortunate. However, we're going to try to see if we can get those matched up using the automated system. But from a spreadsheet standpoint, we're not going to have that visibility. That's why the ad group names, it's important to have a naming classification where you can actually narrow it down, so you don't have 20 different products in the same ad group. You're narrowing it down a little more finer than that. So what I'm looking at on this is I'm going to add in another column. So I'm just going to insert a column. I'm just going to call this one net. And I'll jump over here. So the net one, and I put this into the slide, which is going to be available after the call. The net one is simply going to, it's going to be the difference of, the calculation I'm going to do here is simply just the product sales minus my total spend for that product. That way, just format this for dollar signs here. That way I actually know what the net spend is. I mean, the ACOS is fine if you are consistent as far as the number of units you sell, but oftentimes what makes a difference starting out is whether or not you're making money or you're losing money. Now, to be clear, both ACOS and this net figure are both, you have to take it with a grain of salt because it is based off of the gross sales. It's not based off of your net margin. So you're going to have to, the ACOS, you can obviously try to match it up and have it lower than what you've calculated for your net margin for your product is. With the net amount, it's simply just a case of, you figure out, okay, am I making a lot of money? When you're trying to optimize your campaign, you're looking for the big rocks, the things that are really working really well that you can try to push more, or the things that are really just blowing your budget. I've made mistakes, where I've gone after a keyword and I've blown $200 in a matter of a few days, just because I wasn't paying attention to it. It was an auto campaign that was running, and I thought the sales were going to catch up, and they never did. They never even materialized at all. It just blew $200 in my budget right away. So the first thing that I focus in on, and what I'm going to do here is, now that I've created this formula of simply just the product sales minus the spend, I'm going to double click on this little caret down here, and it's going to populate this all the way down to the bottom. And if I scoot down all the way down to the bottom here, I can actually do some summations here in Excel, and I can do an auto sum. And we're going to make sure that that's going all the way to the top here. So in this particular case, it actually shows that I'm, spending 14, or I'm earning, or I have $1,400 in sales more than I'm spending, to be more accurate. On my spend, in fact, let me just go ahead and do some column, add up some of these columns here. Make sure that I'm going all the way to the top, H2, okay. Bear with me for one moment here. Oops, there we go. And then I might do like an overall ACOS, the advertising cost of sales calculation, which is simply just your spend, your advertising spend divided by your product sales, your gross product sales. Make that a percentage. Hopefully, I'm a little bit of a data geek, and so hopefully not too many of you are glazing over at the moment. I'll get back on track here momentarily, trust me. So what we're looking at here is that I'm looking at my entire account that are still active during the month of October. And I am looking at, as far as I can see my total impressions across my entire view here, the total clicks, how much I've spent, how much I've sold, the net difference, and my ACOS overall across my entire active account right now. This is all the same information that you can get, that you can actually get from the free report from ppcscope.com today, if you wanted to go out there and do that. So this is, some basic information that is available, and you can see a quick snapshot of that. Now, one of the things that we do with the software that I do manually here in the spreadsheet is I actually go in, because I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at, this is where it starts getting interesting. This is actually where you start finding some of the nuggets. So hopefully everybody's tuned in at the moment here, because I'm finally back on topic with what you need to know. Now that we've got the setup on the spreadsheet taken care of, now we can go back, and what I've done, I've simply just sorted this particular column in Excel by largest to smallest, and I can see as far as where my my ones that are not losing me money versus all the way down at the bottom where the ones are losing me money. Now, in this particular case, we're going to take a look at the top, or the best couple and the worst couple, just an example, just to save us a little bit of time. But in this particular case, what we're seeing is that here we have, at the bottom here, we have one that we've spent $30, over $30, or where we have a net loss of over $30. If you actually come in here and take a look at it a little closer, okay, so we've spent $30, and we actually have not made any sales whatsoever. And so this one is, we're just, at the moment, we're just purely bleeding money out of this one. We can go in and we can look at the specific search term, and we can see that the vitamin G serum, in this particular case, these are all kind of example stuff that I just pulled in, but and clearly that specific term is costing us a lot of money. It's not converting to sales. Now you can there's multiple approaches you can look at this. One is if my first focus is to eliminate where I'm losing money the most and try to plug the leak, if you will, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, okay, vitamin G serum, and I'm not going to act on that just yet. I'm just going to make a mental note of it, and that vitamin G serum is suspect at this point because I'm losing $30 in a matter of the past, within this month. And yet I'm not getting any sales on this. And so maybe I'll just kind of mark these so I can keep track of it. Same thing with a couple of these others here. I've got no sales on a few of these others. And so I'm just going to mark these down here for future reference. Now, at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm looking at, these are kind of like my worst 5 across my entire account. Now, in the, just kind of a point of reference from what you've seen in the PPC scope free report, that is actually looking at your entire account view. The future versions will drill down into campaigns and ad groups and specific search terms and specific products, and so it's going to be a lot more detailed, a lot more analytical. But for the free report, it's still very useful because the most and least effective chart will actually, and let me just had somebody who was asking if I could show that really quick. Let me just log in here and do that real quick here. So this is actually out on the PPC Scope platform. If you haven't used it right now, it is free. You know, the entry-level version is always going to be free. So if you haven't used it, use it. And let's see here. So this is the one that we're looking at here, my auto campaign report, which is the search term report. I'm going to import that, generate the report. So what this represents is similar to what we were looking at in the spreadsheet, in that it showed, the worst offenders down here. It also showed some of our best netting products up top here as well. So this is the equivalent of basically looking at, which are the ones that are my worst ones. So if the way that I would use this free report in this example is you can see as far as what your overall account health is from a standpoint of your ACOS. You can also see some interesting things as far as like, how many impressions you're getting and orders and that type of thing. And it'll also actually calculate your average ad spend per unit sold. So there is some really good information, even though it's free. It's there's some gems in here, and included in that, like the gems, for instance, looking at this and saying, okay, this vitamin G serum is costing you a bunch of money. You can see it. It's really easy to see. It's visual, and I can go in and I can roll over here and I can see, okay, I can see which campaign, which ad group, so I can go in there and kill it if I need to, or at least pause it until I can research it a little bit farther. So in this particular case, we found the worst ones. Now let me jump up here and find the best ones. Oh, so my point on this was that because we're looking at it from an account-wide standpoint, you can certainly go in and say, well, I just want to look at just one specific product. And you can do the same thing. You can look at your best, and you can look at your worst. You are going to have the best idea as far as, okay, what's my leading product? What am I selling the most? How can I optimize that product the most, and make sure that I'm building upon the advertising that's working best, and I'm eliminating the items that are working the least. Now, in this particular case, these are fairly small numbers, but they're not profitable, and so they may not be the best use of your ad budget. Go back and show everything again, just from a high-level standpoint. So looking at the top ones here, top few, we're doing pretty well, and we've got some orders coming through. And those, we can start seeing patterns in the keywords that are actually converting. So the way that I would look at this, and here's where I've got the software set up so that it actually is going to recognize patterns over. It's going to recognize patterns over. Or recurring sales, for instance, as opposed to just one-off, because anybody can come out here and they can do a search for, like in this case, makeup kit for girls. But if nobody else ever searches for that, that's a long tail. That's a rare keyword. You can take it as a win, and you can, well, I suppose as far as conversions go, I mean, obviously there was people who are searching for it, but as far as conversions go, it's a one-off. So what I typically do when I'm looking at the ads that are at the search terms that are actually making some money is I'll actually eliminate the 0 and the 1 order, I'm looking for ones that actually recur, that are going to convert more than once, that show they have the potential of being an actual pattern. Okay. Hold on one second here. I'm going to take a breather here in just a second. Let me finish up my thought here on this one. And so what I might do is I'm just looking for common keywords that I might be able to plug in. For instance, like in this one, raw makeup, raw, kit, makeup kit. These types of things are some search terms that seem to be coming up again and again. Now you're going to want to check to make sure that you don't have just an equal amount of negative ones. So for instance, if we looked at everything and we said raw makeup. I don't know what raw makeup is. I just made it up. So, but what I can tell here is that if I'm looking at raw makeup, then I can tell that overall it seems to be leaning toward a profitable phrase that I might pick out, and I might actually go after, put it into its own campaign, for instance, or into an ad group, and test a phrase match. Probably not an exact match because you can see there's other variations that surround it, but raw makeup by itself, I might put it into a phrase match and see if I can get even better conversions, a little bit higher cost, but better conversions, and I'm going to test that. If it doesn't work out, I'll go back to the broad, and maybe I'll do some keyword research so I can find, instead of having, in this case, instead of having 30 different variations of raw makeup, maybe I can throw that term into AdWords or into merchant words or something, and maybe I'll come up with 200 variations of raw makeup and throw that into a campaign and test those. That's the way I'm going to broaden the width of my advertising campaigns, so that I may not get traffic on some of the lower long tail rare search terms, but I've significantly widened my the number of searches I'm likely to get, therefore increasing my overall visibility and impressions that I'm getting out there of my advertising, and ideally those are going to translate into more and more sales. That's how you increase. You can't just, it's not like AdWords where you can just throw more money at a single keyword and you'll get more traffic. In Amazon, you've got to go wide, you've got to go with the variations. And so that's what I'm doing here, is I'm looking for the core terms that seem to be fairly profitable, and I'm expanding to look for a lot more variations and test a larger variation, maybe a campaign with 200 variations of raw makeup as an example. Hopefully that makes some sense. I look forward to the questions we have afterwards here. So I'm going to take a quick breather here and check to see if anybody's screaming at me on the on the one second here. Okay. Okay, so from the audience, can I get a quick thumbs up? Do you want me to jump into the, just make a comment in the comment section there. Have you liked what you've heard so far? Should I jump into the campaign performance report, or do you want to jump in, because we're kind of running out of time here, do you want to jump into the question and answer portion? While you're posting your questions or your opinion as far as the direction of this call into the comments on the YouTube, I'm going to jump into the next slide here. and just assume I'm going to go forward with a campaign performance report. And I'll just kind of discuss this really quickly until I hear otherwise from each of you. So with campaign performance report, some of the advantages of campaign performance report is that it's going to include the product SKU, so you can identify specific products that, as far as how your advertising is doing for specific products, as well as you're also going to have the option for not only weekly, but you're going to have daily, weekly, and monthly metrics. And it does actually show you the manual keyword matching as well. And then there's actually a lot of similarities as far as the search term report and the campaign performance report. It's simply just whether you're looking at a month view or you're looking at the narrowing it down to a specific SKU as opposed to an ad group or a campaign. In fact, I'm not going to go into detail about the campaign performance report, simply because there's so many similarities that it's going to be, a lot of it's going to be redundant to what the strategy that I would use with the search term report. I can certainly go into that in more detail in a future webinar, but I think from what I'm hearing, sounds like we need to start jumping into some of the question and answers. So go ahead and start posting your questions or comments or anything you want to discuss a little bit more into the comments section on the YouTube, on the YouTube Hangout there. And keep in mind that I do have about a 10-second delay between when I'm speaking, and so there's going to be a lot more gaps between my responses and my audio. So just be patient on that. So Jim, jumping in there with your question, as far as why to even use the campaign performance report, again, it does have some advantage. It does have different views. So there's three different things on that I like. One is the fact that it does include the product SKU, so you can identify which specific product. So maybe if you have a product that has multiple variations and you have those all in the same ad group, the search term report's not going to help you identify which specific variation unless you can identify, blue widget with blue widget. The campaign performance report will actually show you which specific SKU. Now, if it's an automatic campaign, it's just going to show you an asterisk, and so you're going to have to go back over the search term report anyway. But it is good for seeing the specific product, as well as being able to see a month view, which a lot of people believe is a lot more accurate when you have more time to work with it. And then let's see what, and then third, of course, is that if you are mapping out your day-to-day, as far as your daily ad budget, your spend on a daily basis, you can see trends before and after the weekend, that type of thing. The data is broken down on a daily basis. It's going to be a lot easier with the PPC scope platform, because we'll get to the point where we're going to have that mapped out over time, so you can just visualize it. You don't have to go in and analyze a spreadsheet like this manually. All this stuff really you're not going to have to do. I have to go through all this, through all the pain of actually figuring this stuff out. But in the meantime, hopefully this is helping you a little bit as far as being able to see how I look at and how I advise clients when it comes to their advertising campaigns. Okay, next questions, please. Okay, so as far as next question I'm getting here, okay, so as far as from Tom, okay, so do you use same keywords in manual campaigns as in the auto target campaigns? Yes and no. So there's a couple different strategies on that. One is I always start out with automatic campaigns primarily so that I can confirm that Amazon agrees with me as far as the relevancy of my product to the search terms that they're the keywords that I'm bidding on. Because ultimately, if I'm launching a new product, if I've done a great job of optimizing my listing, then when I advertise using auto campaign, when I advertise well, when I let Amazon choose the keywords for me, it should come back and tell me and start showing impressions for my ads and show me the customer search terms that are in line with what I thought should have been relevant to my advertisement. I don't want to have, like, for instance, if I'm selling tent stakes, I don't want to have it showing ads for beer cooler, for people searching for beer cooler. It's not that directly, there's some relevance, but it's not closely relevant. And so that tells me, that's feedback from Amazon saying, this is what we think your product listing is about. That tells me I need to go fix my product listing if it's not correct. Or it tells me, okay, they're dead on. They're giving me the impressions. They're giving me love with the impressions and showing my advertisement. And therefore, I have a much better chance that my product listing is optimized, and I'll probably rank pretty well for the ones that are for the search terms that I'm getting a lot of impressions for. I should tell you something, because the second piece that I use on that is I use it to optimize my listings for organic search reasons, specifically with the ones that are getting a lot of impressions, a lot of clicks, with conversions, especially the ones that are getting conversions. You definitely want to be ranked organically as high as you can possibly get. So I use the pay-per-click reports to tell me how I can optimize my product listing for organic better. So as far as Tom's question, as far as having manual campaigns, the same keywords, I do a little bit of overlap, because there is typically a transition when you set up a new advertising campaign. Like, for instance, if I identify 10 converting keywords from the automatic campaigns, I'm going to copy those over to a manual campaign that I can isolate further. Maybe I'll do some testing in there as far as phrase match or exact match, or just keep them all broad, but just so I can control the budget or increase the budget specifically to those sets of converting keywords. So I can just set it for $100 budget or something. And what I do a little bit of overlap is I keep the automatic campaign running. I don't eliminate those keywords, but I keep the automatic campaign running while I have got the manual campaign until Amazon starts showing me some good impressions on my manual keywords, the keywords that are in my manual campaign. Then I might go back and eliminate them from my automatic campaign through a negative, or turning off my auto campaign altogether. Because there's a little bit of delay sometimes of transitioning with a brand new campaign. I have a little bit of overlap. Yes, there's some cannibalism there where the traffic is split up, but usually I do that as part of the transition. But I do the manual campaigns to try to isolate it or to do additional testing. Let's see here, second question. So Tom, hopefully that is answering your question there. The second, okay, so the next question is, do you advertise each variant product, red, blue, white, or all as a group? That's kind of going back to Jim's question as far as why you would even use the campaign performance report, because you could separate them. I personally would put them all into the same ad group. If I had a product with color variation or size variation, or shade or tone, or whatever the case is, whatever the variations are, I would probably put those into the same ad group, because you're going to have some overlap anyway. So you might as well put them in the same ad group and let Amazon show your ad based off of what it thinks is going to convert well. It's going to show the impressions, and it's going to show your product more what it thinks. And it's got a lot more data than we do. So let it do what it needs to do with the automatic campaign. But then once I determine which ones are going to be my lead variation, like say the red product is going to be clearly my top, the one that's searched for the most. Maybe it's my top seller. I will certainly move those all over, all the variations over into a single manual ad group, and from there I might expand on it there. But sometimes, honestly, sometimes you can keep an ad group, or you can keep an automatic campaign running, because Amazon just has more data, and so sometimes the automatic campaigns just continue to perform better than a manual campaign, because a manual campaign does require maintenance. It requires some tender loving care and optimization, and you need to check on a regular basis. If you don't have that kind of time, I've got a client that has 600 SKUs on Amazon. I don't have time to go through every single one of those. And so there's a lot of time. You saw from, what I was doing here, I had some groups where I had my top 10 products that I was focusing on, and I was optimizing the manual campaigns, and then everything else I just left in their own groups of automatic campaigns, and they've been running that way for 2 years. And as long as they are significantly profitable, maybe you've got a sub 20% ACOS, then I'll probably leave them alone, just until, because I don't have time or the team to go after some of those other ones. All right, Diego, how are you doing? So from the search terms, which had 2 or more sales, what kind of campaign would you do? So when I have 2 or more sales or 2 or more orders, what I see there is it's basically showing me that it has the potential of being a recurring product. It's not just a one-off. So I might pull off every single search term, customer search term as an example. Every customer search term I might pull that converts, I will pull over to a manual campaign. But I might take a note of the ones that are converting more than once, so that I know as far as what additional research I might want to do. So I might want to look closer at the core phrases that are within those terms that are converting more often, have more orders and converting more often, so that I can do some additional keyword research as an example, so that I can widen my campaign and do some testing, do some more testing on a much wider variety of variations on the core terms that are converting. What else we got? Any more questions? We are past 9 o'clock. I was only planning on doing. I'm really glad to stick around a little bit longer here if you have some other questions, or if you want me to focus in on anything specific. Put it out there right now. And while I'm doing that, I'll go ahead and switch over to, there's my questions and answers slide. This reference here, here's my contact information, whether it is for consulting or for, if you just have questions, you can throw it at ppcscope.com, at gmail.com. You can also book a 1-hour appointment with me on Calendly/PPCscope. And then just kind of a reference for some of the other search, or for some of the other campaign reports that are available. You've got the search term report we covered, the campaign performance report, the estimated page 1 bid. While I'm waiting for the next question coming in here, it looks like the estimated page 1 bid, the reason that I hear a lot of people make a comment that it's inaccurate is simply because Amazon does not do a good job of explaining how that works. And the way that works, and the more that we're researching, has to do with when it comes to department nodes. So the identifier that a product is in. I'm of the belief that not only is every product have a primary node or sub-department, subcategory if you want, that it belongs in, that's going to get you the best traffic, the most impressions, it's going to be most relevant to your product. But I also believe that, based on observation, that every search term also has primary, secondary, and tertiary nodes or departments or categories that it gets related with, that it is considered relevant to. So think of it this way, is if you do a search, take your top 5 search terms, for instance, or keywords that you typically bid on, or the most profitable or whatever, or doing the worst for that matter, and take those, put them into the Amazon search bar, and do a search just like you're a customer, and look to see which departments and sub-departments show up in the left navigation. chances are you're gonna go in there and say, okay, yeah, there's my department, that's where my product is. If you keep searching long enough, maybe looking at your worst performing product, your worst performing search terms that you think should be getting impressions, that you think should be converting, do a search. See if the department, the list of departments that come back on the left-hand navigation, which Amazon considers the primary departments for that search term, is your product in one of those? If it's not, you may want to consider, at least research, whether or not there's another node, pathway node they call it, or browse node, they also call that, for that kind of terminology. You may want to request a move over to a more relevant browser node or pathway node that you know is going to get you a lot more traffic. You can actually also do that by requesting that you add in a second one. So you've got your primary one that you're in already. You can ask them to be put into a secondary one. Now you can't do a top level, like say, just put me in beauty. That's not going to work. You can't just say beauty or put me in skincare. You actually have to have it fairly narrowed down so it's a sub department. But once you identify that, you can request that and make sure you use the terminology. Not that you want to be in two categories, but you want a secondary browse node or pathway node added to your product. Give that a try. Let me take a question here. Tom, clicks or click-through rate more relevant? That's a good question, Tom. So it's kind of, how long is a piece of string? It's one of those kind of questions. In that, it depends on how many. I typically look primarily at the clicks, the number of clicks. Now I'm going to look at the click-through ratio simply because I want to know the ratio between the impressions and the clicks. I also want to know the ratio between the clicks and the conversions. And ultimately, as far as my whole sales funnel goes, the ratio between the impressions and the conversions as well, to kind of the overall health of that particular search term or keyword. So I would say, I would look at it from two different standpoints. One is that if I'm looking for products that don't have any conversions, but have a high amount of clicks, that product or that search term has the potential to become a converting one for me, because a lot of people apparently are looking at my title, which, by the way, for most advertising is only 35 characters. So keep that in mind when you're creating your title, is that it's, what's the 35 character view? Because that's what's going to be shown as your ad. So if you're not getting very many click-throughs on something that gets high impressions, then your title or your image may be off from, or maybe not considered relevant to what they're searching for. So in that case, I would definitely look as far as the click-through rate. But also you want to look at clicks because it's a secondary indicator as far as what search term has a potential to become a converter. And if you can get if you have a high number of impressions but a low relative amount of clicks, then look at your title and your image, because it's not coming up as relevant to a shopper. If you have a high number of clicks and low amount of conversions, then you've got something with your listing where you've either led them down a path and you're offering something different, or you're simply not, your listing is not optimized according to what they were searching for. Whether that is you didn't convince them that it was the right model, color, flavor, ingredient, price point, whatever. That's when you start looking at optimizing your listing a little bit. So hopefully that answers your question, Tom. Tom, you already know that I'm available through email too, and that I am responsive. So hit me up there if I didn't cover that. So Diego, as far as PPC scope, so right now the free report is available if you just go out to ppcscope.com. And if you go, yeah, if you just go out to ppcscope.com, in fact, that's actually where we're going to post this replay. And you can sign up for a free account. You can upload your, actually in the training section, there's actually instructions as far as how to acquire your search term report from Amazon, how to upload it, how to, evaluate it, that type of thing. We're going to have that all in video format here shortly, but right now it's just like a PDF. But the free report is an account level overview, really high level overview, but has some really good points in that. If you look at, do I still have that up? I don't. No, I already pulled it. It's going to tell you what your best and your worst search terms are as far as whether or not you're making money or losing money from a gross sales standpoint. And that's an easy way for you to check back. Go out there, see which ones are costing you a bunch of money. Try to eliminate those either through like a negative exact match on your auto campaigns or through I don't typically recommend pausing it. Pausing it is more of a, I don't have time to deal with it at the moment. I'll come back to it when I have time. But you typically want to handle it as opposed to simply just pause the campaign because you may be leaving money on the table because of a related search term is working for you. So use the free report. We are releasing the basic version is coming out here. I don't have an exact date from my development team yet, but I think we're targeting probably here in the next couple of weeks. But we're working night and day on this thing like crazy to try to get something a little bit more in depth. The basic version, the pro version, the enterprise and agency version, those are all going to be the various subscription level pays or subscription levels, but they're going to come with some phenomenal analytics that are going to combine things like your campaign performance report, your estimated page one bid report, your search term report, as well as a lot of other metrics that it's going to make it really handy to use. So once we do come out with those, we'll certainly announce that. But for now, the free version, go out and use it. Use it every single week. Tweak and tune your campaigns. Use it again the following week. Just keep it up. Let's see here. Martin and Philip, hey guys, how's it going? Let's see here. So, wondering if there's anything that affects the bid cost. Oh yeah. Bidding around $2 for each keyword to be on page one. Can a conversion rate? Oh, sorry. You know what, backing up a little bit a second here, I started mentioning this. I want to make sure I get this point out here. The estimated page one bid, the reason why it's misleading to a lot of people is because Amazon doesn't tell you that the estimated page one is based off of not only that the department relevance as far as that department node that I mentioned, but it's also not intended to be page one of all department search. When somebody first comes into Amazon and they do just a blanket search, it typically is not for all of Amazon page one that you're bidding on. It's based off of your specific category, and in the more competitive niches or some of the more granular niches, it's going to be the specific sub-department. So it's a relative bid estimate. So keep that in mind. It is actually valuable to use, but you kind of have to figure out how relevant the bid is compared to your product and the department that you're in. So Martin, Philip, back to what you're saying as far as your conversion rate, as far as making that bidding cheaper. What I've seen on that is a couple of things. Similar to the way the bestseller rank changes throughout the day, and it's a relative metric based off of what every other seller is doing. The campaign, the advertising platform is similar in that it will also adjust based off of a number of factors, whether or not somebody still has a campaign budget 2 hours after they, 2 hours into the day. And so you could actually probably look If you had this kind of detailed metrics, which you can see on other advertising platform, but not necessarily on Amazon, but from one day to the next, from 1 hour to the next, you could be having a different bid rate because it's based off of how many other sellers are competing, how many, you know, whether or not they're bidding higher or lower, whether or not they're bidding at all because they've run out of budget. You know, maybe everybody blows their budget in the morning in the States, and then in the afternoon, you know, all of a sudden your cost per click goes down. Certainly the higher the perceived value of that term, the higher average bid is going to be consistently across the board on average. Conversion rate is going to play a factor as far as, because again, go back to what I was saying early here. Where is it? There we go. As far as Amazon's ad placement, back on the second slide here, it's based off of a number of things, including relevance, conversion rate, your bid, and whether or not how targeted your search, your keyword bid is to what the customer searched for. So in that particular case, yes, conversion rate is definitely going to play into the factor. I'm sure they have several factors that go into when they actually show your ad, as well as the price that you pay to be there. So it's a matter of you kind of have to do some testing. Typically what I recommend is that if you've gone into a competitive category and you are bidding on a term that is expensive, you know, and I consider $2 expensive, and you're breaking even or you're losing money, while you might be getting some other benefits, such as some organic bump or some other benefit there with your BSR, for instance, typically what I would recommend is you need to start looking at what are some of really look into your search term report, look at those core phrases that are consistently turning into clicks and conversions, especially conversions, and see if you can focus more on some of those longer tail search terms and focus less on these expensive ones. Like in my example here is that, you know, if tent steak costs you $2, tent steak may not be the one you want to focus your budget on. Maybe you want to focus your budget on, maybe you want to back off tent steak to 50 cents so that you're just kind of getting it when everybody else runs out of their budget on a Saturday, then all of a sudden you're getting a bunch of sales. So you don't want to eliminate it completely, but you want to reduce it down to a more reasonable amount so that it makes sense. And it also allows Amazon to show some of your related search terms, as well as you want to make sure that you have plenty of related search terms so that you can catch some of those. And that's why you want to look at your full list of customer search terms so you can identify the pattern of what people are searching for, not just that core expensive high competition search term. And as far as and your final thing, as far as the conversion rate, if you can make the bidding cheaper, in theory, I don't know that I have enough data to have tested that to know for sure on that one, but that is certainly something that we should make sure that we try to add to the Amazon PPC troubleshooting group for testing later on. Tom, as far as the cheat sheet goes, that sounds like a great idea. Hopefully that's something I can get to. Maybe I'll try to outsource this video out to somebody who can convert it into some Cliff Notes. If that happens, great. Veronica, so one of the things that typically happens is that Amazon, on the question on this one is that why do you have an ASIN number starting with B00? Why do you have somebody else's product ASIN number showing up in my search terms? Well, part of that is I've got a couple of theories on that one, but one of them is that somebody could actually be doing a specific search for a search term. More than likely, that is being shown as a customer search term to represent the fact that your ad was shown on somebody else's product detail page. And the problem, from what I've observed from my own testing, is that while it may seem compelling to go after to try to bid on those, I really have not found bidding on competitors' ASINs profitable at all. And so that's kind of where I'm thinking it has to do with your ad was shown on a competitor's product listing and you got to click because they were considering alternatives while they were on a competitor listing. That's my theory. It's kind of what I'm working on right now. What I would do, something I do absolutely do, is I do create a campaign that targets my competitors' brand names, especially with the phrase match available. I'll put in, the competitor's 2 or 3 word brand name, and people who, if they've built an off Amazon brand name and reputation, and they're searching on Amazon, especially national brands and that type of thing you're competing with, absolutely do a campaign. I would say in like one of my clients, probably 12 to 15% of their sales come from people searching for their competitor and they're all considering alternatives. So absolutely create a competitor thing. You may put in their ASIN numbers, but I would probably recommend just using their brand names or their unique product names, most likely in a phrase match to target them. All right. Any last questions? Sounds like we're wrapping up here. As far as future, I may go into, oops. Where is it? There we go. As far as follow-up goes, I mean, give me, you can reach out to me. I am, that's kind of an odd term there. I am for hire, but typically if you are going to book one-on-one consulting with me, I am available in half-hour and 1-hour blocks to go through your search term with you to give you some one-on-one direct coaching with those or analysis of those campaigns to help you on those. And you can get to that through, basically book time with me through Calendly. The rate on that, I haven't really established that yet, but generally I do, probably like a half-an-hour block would probably be, $50 or something like that, something simple. But I try to keep it fairly focused and actionable for you. But this was not to promote that. It was more of a case of just kind of an education course. So this is an overview of the primary advertising reports that I use and I focus in on when I'm doing consulting. Really high level overview that we ran through fairly fast. I may do a future one depending on how many people request that I do like a 102 class that goes into some of the other reports, such as the estimated page 1 bid, the other ASIN reports, some of the performance reports, including all the way up to, like, say, the bulk operations reports and how to use those if you have a lot of different products. So it looks like that's all for tonight. I want to thank everybody for attending. I appreciate your questions. I'm going to post this replay onto PPC Scope into ppcscope.com in the training section. Make sure that you go out there if you haven't already and get an account on PPC Scope, and it's free, and run the one-page account level free analysis report. Again, it's free. Run it every week if you want. And then post some questions to me either through email or on the feedback and support section on PPC Scope, or even through the Facebook group, the Amazon PPC troubleshooting group, and fire some questions at me about either the application or about what I've talked about here tonight. And I look forward to extending our conversation on future webinars and in the groups in the future. Thank you, everybody. I've been Brian Johnson with Mark Johnson. This has been the Interpreting Amazon Advertising Campaign Reports, the 101 class. And thank you. Have a good night.